Michael was walking hurriedly through the scorching streets of New York, holding little Jake's hand tightly. The asphalt felt like it was melting from the heat, while honking horns and sirens blended with the rushed footsteps of people crossing the sidewalks. Towering buildings reflected the sun, but all the luxury around them couldn't hide the shadow living in his eyes. Since the accident that took Emily's life, his wife, Michael, had been living on autopilot, as if trapped in a loop of colorless days. As they crossed the street, Jake tugged at his father's arm and pointed to a corner of the sidewalk. "Dad, look at her," he said in a soft voice, full of childlike curiosity. Michael took a moment to react, but when he followed his son's gaze, he saw a woman collapsed on the ground, covered in rags and filth. It was the kind of scene he would normally ignore in the rush of the day, but this time was different. There was something about that woman, something impossible to ignore. Her face, despite the marks of time and the harsh life on the streets, had a look, a shy smile, that looked exactly like Emily's. Jake, innocent as ever, said the words that pierced his father's chest like an arrow. "She looks like Mom." Michael's heart raced, and for a moment he forgot where he was. The woman turned her face toward them with slow movements, and time seemed to freeze. People around them started noticing the scene. Whispers rose like small echoes in the crowd. "Wait, does he know her?" asked a nearby woman. "No way. She looks like his wife," said another, in a tone of shock and curiosity. Michael stood frozen, battling the storm of emotions rising within him. He tried to look away, but couldn't. Something deep inside screamed that this encounter meant more. Her face, even covered in grime, seemed to carry memories he swore he had left behind. Jake stayed by his father's side, gripping his hand tightly, as if he could feel the invisible weight of that moment. Inside Michael, a mix of pain, longing, and confusion stirred like a storm about to erupt. Everything he thought he knew about the past, the present, and maybe even the future, was crashing together before his eyes. That woman, lost on the streets, might be more than a bitter coincidence. She could be a piece of a puzzle he never knew existed. And right there, surrounded by curious stares and whispers, one question pounded in his mind. Who was that woman? How could she look so much like Emily? The answer felt just a few steps away, but Michael knew that finding it might turn his world upside down. Oh, and before we continue this story, let me give you a quick heads up. A lot of people have been saying YouTube's been unsubscribing folks without warning. Take a second to check that the red button's still clicked. I don't want you missing the next episodes of this story because it's just getting started. And smash that like button to show some love, all right? Also, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this story's reaching. Michael stood frozen, heart pounding as the woman in front of him tried to hide her face behind dirty, tangled hair. Jake, innocent, kept holding tightly to his father's hand, not understanding the storm that was forming there. The street felt silent, as if everyone around was holding their breath, waiting for the next move. Are you okay?" Michael managed to ask, his voice hoarse and trembling. The woman slowly lifted her eyes, revealing a tired but intense glow, as if carrying years of suffering. She opened her mouth to answer, but her voice came out low, almost a whisper, as if speaking was more effort than she could handle. "Who are you?" he asked, a mix of fear and hope tightening his chest. Michael wanted to believe that this woman was a bridge to a past he couldn't fully grasp. But doubt gnawed at every thought. How could someone look so much like Emily, his wife, and be here, like this? Some people around them kept watching, exchanging whispers. "Look at that. The millionaire standing with a homeless woman. How embarrassing," someone murmured with disdain. Others just shook their heads, thinking the scene too strange to be real. Jake, sensing the tension, squeezed his father's hand even tighter, as if trying to protect him from the chaos. Michael felt his chest tighten, a mix of anger at fate and compassion for this woman who, despite the misery, still had a spark in her eyes that reminded him of Emily. For a moment it felt like time had stopped, and all the pain he'd tried to bury took shape right there before him. The woman tried to stand, but her trembling legs barely held her. Michael took a step forward and reached out. "Here, let me help you." She hesitated, looking at the boy staring at her with hopeful eyes. Something in that moment sparked something inside her, and for an instant, the shadow surrounding her seemed to retreat. Jake smiled as if he already knew that this woman could be a light in the darkness the family carried. Michael, however, felt the knot in his throat tighten. He knew this meeting wasn't by chance. The past, the pain, the mystery of this woman who looked like Emily, it was all right there in front of him. As he helped her up, one question echoed in his mind. What was she hiding behind that tired gaze? What story of pain, loss, and struggle had life carved into her? A story that now seemed to hold the key to a secret that could turn his world upside down. The crowd around them kept watching, some still whispering, others starting to move on. Michael knew this day would mark the beginning of something he couldn't control, but deep down, he was sure. This story was just beginning. He supported her gently, feeling her weight mixed with fragility. Her face, even dirt-covered, held an expression that cut deep, a sadness so ancient, even time hadn't managed to erase it. She blinked slowly, almost disbelieving someone had stopped to help. Jake, still holding his father's hand, watched with wide, hopeful eyes, as if knowing something important was happening. "You shouldn't be here like this," Michael said quietly, almost to himself. The street's heat seemed to fade, replaced by a coldness creeping over him. People began to scatter, but the murmurs still lingered. Maybe she's crazy. What's a rich guy doing with someone like her? What a strange situation. Michael felt the weight of those judgments, but deep down he didn't care. The only thing that mattered now was understanding who she was. She tried to speak again, her voice hoarse, broken, full of pauses and hesitation. I don't know. I don't know who I am." Michael swallowed hard, his hands trembling. The desperation in her eyes crushed his chest. For a moment, all he wanted was to protect this woman who might be a forgotten piece of a past he didn't even know still existed. Jake, sensing his father's pain, held his hand even tighter. "Dad, is she hungry?" Michael looked down at his son, the lump in his throat so big he could barely speak. "Yeah, son. We'll take care of her," he said, his voice steady, but full of emotion. Without thinking, Michael pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and tried to wipe the woman's face. She closed her eyes, accepting the gesture like a rare kindness. A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by distant horns and muffled whispers from nearby. Michael knew there was more here than just a familiar face. There was a buried story, a truth that could change everything, and the fear started to grip his throat. The past came crashing in, invading the present with a force he wasn't ready to face. The woman looked at him and, for the first time, managed to string together a few words. "Emily, I don't know." Michael felt the ground disappear beneath him. It was like a door had swung open, wide, full of doubts and tears. Jake stepped forward and pulled the only snack he had from his pocket, a sandwich wrapped in paper. The woman took it with trembling hands, and for a moment a faint smile appeared on her face. Michael saw it and felt a mix of hope and fear. Hope that this small light could illuminate the dark path he'd been walking. Fear that the truth, when it came, would be even more painful than he could bear. He held her arm tightly, like someone clinging to a last chance, and decided he couldn't leave her there. The crowd had already begun to disperse, voices fading away, but inside him, the storm only grew stronger. That woman, that shadow from the past, might be the answer Michael had been searching for, or the beginning of an even greater pain. And he knew, from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. The mystery behind those tired eyes was far from over. And as he walked with her and Jake by his side, one thing burned in his chest. This story was only just beginning. Michael moved slowly, supporting her arm, worried she might collapse at any moment. Her body trembled, as if every step was a sacrifice, and the smell of sweat and abandonment made the air heavy. Jake walked beside them, eyes alert, as if he could sense the urgency and danger of the situation. As they moved along the sidewalk, people around them began to go about their lives again, but a few glances still followed them, full of judgment and curiosity. "This is insane. A millionaire helping someone like that," muttered an older woman, looking at Michael with disdain. He felt the weight of her gaze, but his focus remained on the fragile woman by his side. She carried something that, somehow, felt like a part of him. They reached a small cafe on the corner, a humble place, far from Michael's usual luxury. He helped the woman into a chair, feeling her hands cold and sweaty. Jake tugged at his father's jacket and, without saying a word, looked at the woman with that pure, honest gaze only kids have, a timid but genuine smile. Michael called the waiter, ordered a glass of water and something to eat. The woman, still motionless, seemed to absorb the environment with a lost expression. When the glass arrived, she gripped it with trembling hands, sipping in small gulps, like someone who hadn't had water in days. Michael didn't take his eyes off her. Every movement, every breath, felt like a piece of his pain dissolving before him. He tried to start a conversation, his voice low, almost a whisper. "What's your name? Do you remember anything? Where did you come from?" She looked at him, eyes still dazed, and for a moment, silence spoke louder than any answer. Then, in a weak and broken voice, she said, I don't know. I don't know who I am. I just feel like I lost everything." Her words hit Michael like a punch. The confusion inside him blended with anger. Anger at the world, at life, at the cruelty of fate. He squeezed her hand, trying to give a strength he wasn't even sure he had. Jake, looking at that woman who seemed both a stranger and somehow familiar, stepped forward and said, with all the sincerity only a child can have, "I'll take care of you." What Michael felt in that instant was overwhelming. Fear of what it meant. Hope for what it could become. And a responsibility heavier than anything he'd ever carried. He knew that woman, that ghost from the past, had the power to turn his world upside down. As the sun began to disappear behind the Manhattan skyline, the woman gave a faint, fragile smile, almost invisible, like a thin thread of life in the middle of the storm surrounding her. Michael felt tears threaten to surface, but swallowed them down. He didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was certain. That afternoon wouldn't end without answers, or at the very least, new questions that would haunt him for a long time. Outside, the city carried on, loud, indifferent to the drama unfolding at that corner table, where a man, a boy, and a woman prepared to face whatever fate had in store for them, together, despite everything. The sun had nearly vanished when Michael saw the woman take another sip of water. Her filthy hands trembled, gripping the glass like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Jake, beside her, kept watching with that childlike purity, as if hoping all this was just a nightmare about to end. "Maria," Michael said softly, as if giving a name could bring some stability to that surreal moment. "Do you remember anything? Where you live? Someone waiting for you?" She raised her eyes, still lost, and muttered something barely audible. "I lost everything. I was tricked." Those few words cut Michael deep, like a blade. He held her arm tighter, as if physical contact could anchor her in the present. In that fragility, there was a story screaming to be told, a story much bigger than he could have imagined. Maria slowly opened her eyes, gathering strength to go on. "It was another life," she whispered, voice cracking, as if each memory was too heavy to carry. "I had it all, a house, a job, dreams, but a man I trusted, took everything, my name, my story, my future, left me with nothing, with no one." Michael heard every syllable like echoes of his own pain, betrayal, loss, fear. It all mixed inside him. He felt Jake squeeze his hand tighter, as if the boy somehow understood that this was far more than a random encounter between a millionaire and a homeless woman. It was a connection of pain and fate, tying past and present together. As Maria spoke, Michael noticed little details that tore at him. The shy way she smiled, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the gaze that, despite all the exhaustion, still held a light eerily similar to Emily's. That couldn't be a coincidence. A thought started to grow, uncomfortable and relentless. Was Maria somehow connected to Emily? Michael's heart pounded, his stomach turning. He didn't know what to think, but one thing was clear. Maria wasn't just a stranger from the streets. She was a missing piece of a puzzle he'd always avoided putting together. In the weeks that followed, Michael did something he never imagined. He stepped out of his comfort bubble and dove into Maria's past. He searched through torn documents, old letters, faded photographs. Each clue sparked either hope or new pain, until the truth finally came to light. Maria was connected to Emily, half-sisters, daughters of the same father, a man who never had the courage to face his own mistakes. A secret Emily carried in silence, like a wound that never healed. The discovery didn't bring peace. It brought an emotional storm. Michael felt rage, guilt, and sorrow burn inside him. Why hadn't Emily told him? Why hide it all? The answers were buried in the past, in a silence that now screamed louder than ever. Jake, innocent as ever, stayed close to his father, unaware of the layers of pain crumbling around them. Michael looked at his son, and then at Maria, realizing that this wasn't just about old memories. It was about building a future capable of healing what seemed impossible to fix. As the city lights flickered on, Michael felt the weight of that secret tear open a wound that hurt like never before. But he knew he couldn't run anymore. Maria's mystery and Emily's silence stood side by side, two halves of a truth that needed, finally, to come to light. On the drive home, Maria and Jake sat in the back seat, silence filling the car like a heavy fog. Jake slept, exhausted, but Michael was far too awake for rest. The woman beside him seemed far too fragile for the brutal world around them, like a withered flower trying to survive a hurricane. When they got to the apartment, Maria barely managed to lean on the walls as she made it to the couch. Michael helped her carefully, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Jake, half asleep, went straight to bed. The house, always pristine, now felt oddly unfamiliar with this broken presence inside it. Maria sat slowly, avoiding Michael's eyes, as if she carried an old fear she still couldn't let go. He, on the other hand, didn't know how to start the conversation. Words were stuck. The questions burned in his throat. Suddenly, she let out a long sigh, almost a lament. I have these broken pieces in my head, memories that come and go. Some days, I don't even know if it was all real, or just a nightmare. Michael felt his chest tighten. Her pain was so raw, so immediate, it felt like she could collapse at any second. In the days that followed, he tried to create a routine for her, but every step was a challenge. Maria got lost in her own thoughts, forgot where she was, and sometimes her gaze became so empty that Michael wanted to scream, to make the world stop just so she could breathe again. He looked at Jake and felt a mix of fear and hope. Fear of what might still come, and hope that maybe, with time, that broken soul would smile again. In the building, the whispers began. That woman can't be trusted, someone said in the hallway. What's a man like him doing bringing someone like her here? He's ruining his reputation. Michael pretended not to hear, but inside, the shame from the judgment burned hotter than the sun outside. He knew that this story wouldn't be easy to explain to anyone. One afternoon, while Maria was sleeping in the bedroom, Michael was rummaging through a cabinet and found a box of old photos of Emily. He picked one up carefully and saw her smile on paper, a sweet expression that seemed to fade into the shadows of the past. That's when the knot in his throat tightened even more. He needed to understand who Maria really was, and why Emily had kept that secret so carefully. When Maria woke up, he called her into the living room and pulled out an old photo from the box. Two nearly identical girls, hugging on a long-forgotten summer day. She stared at it for a long time, her expression slowly changing. I remember this. But it wasn't my life. It was someone else's. Always was, she said, her voice trembling, her hand hesitating as it touched the image. Michael felt a mix of hope and despair tearing through him. Maria, we'll figure this out. Together. But deep down, the fear kept growing. What if the truth was even crueler than the silence? What if those shadows hid wounds that would never heal? The night fell heavy. As the city slept, the apartment felt like a silent battlefield. Michael watched Maria, seeing not just a lost woman, but a riddle with no easy solution. And he, more than anyone, felt the weight of carrying that story on his shoulders, like an invisible thread linking past to present. Jake, in his room, slept peacefully, unaware of how much that secret was about to change all their lives, forever. And Michael, standing in the living room, could only think about one thing: how to protect the fragility beside him, when the world outside was already showing its worst side. He ran a hand through his hair, walking slowly to the window. From the bedroom, Jake's soft breathing was like a reminder that amidst all the chaos, there was still something pure, something he needed to protect. Maria stirred on the sofa, made a low sound like she was fighting her own thoughts. Michael turned slightly but stayed quiet. She looked up, eyes tired, and asked in a voice that seemed to beg for permission, "Can I stay? Just a few more days? Until I figure out what's happening to me?" He nodded without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need." She took a deep breath, her eyes watery, but no tears fell. It was like she had already cried everything she had. Michael sat slowly in the armchair next to her, keeping a respectful distance. "I found more photos today. You're in some. With Emily." Maria closed her eyes for a moment. Her hand gripped the arm of the sofa tightly. I get flashes, just pieces, a smell, a laugh, a place. But it all fades fast. I can't hold on to anything for long. Just this feeling that I was ripped from somewhere, pulled out, and now none of it makes sense." Michael felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. He wanted to promise it would all be okay, that they'd figure it out. But even he didn't believe that. Outside, the wind hit the window. Maria turned her face toward the sound, then looked back at him. "Do you think she knew that I was alive?" The question hung in the air, heavy. Michael didn't answer. He couldn't. Part of him wanted to believe Emily would have done everything differently if she'd known. But another part was starting to doubt everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed, a sharp, dry sound that made them both jump. Michael stood up fast, confused. Who could be visiting at that hour? He answered. On the other end, a cold, direct voice. "Good evening. We need to speak with you. It's about the woman staying with you. May we come up?" Maria looked at him, eyes wide with panic, as if she already knew what that meant. "Please, don't let them take me." Michael's heart raced. He pressed the button without answering and stood there, frozen, trying to figure out if this was the beginning of an answer, or the start of another problem he had no idea how to solve. He turned off the intercom with a trembling hand, stared at the device as if it might somehow explain everything. He was breathing fast, his chest tight. He turned slowly to Maria. She was curled up on the couch, hugging her knees, her face pale like someone waiting for the worst. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" she whispered, almost voiceless. Michael slowly shook his head. He didn't know. Had no idea who was coming up or what they wanted. But the tone in that voice over the intercom was enough to put him on edge. Maria tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Michael rushed to her, holding her tightly, feeling her body shake with fear. "Don't leave me alone. Please." "I'm right here," he whispered. "No one's going to hurt you." The sound of the elevator in the hallway cut through the silence. Michael went to the door but didn't open it. He looked through the peephole. 2 men in suits, serious faces, one holding a folder. They weren't police or social workers, which only made it even more strange. He opened the door slowly, his body blocking the entrance. "Good evening, Mr. Parker. We won't take much of your time. We need to talk about the woman staying here." "Who are you?" We're representatives of a private foundation. We received a report about Ms. Maria Lewis. She's been missing for over 6 years, listed as mentally unfit after a traumatic episode. Her family wants her back." The words hit like a punch. Michael looked over his shoulder. Maria was there, curled up, eyes locked on him, silently begging. A single tear fell, raw fear, from someone who already knew what was coming. "She's not going anywhere," he said firmly. "Not until we understand what's happening. Not unless she wants to go." The men exchanged a glance, expressionless. "She's not legally capable of making that decision. We're here with a court order." Michael closed the door slowly, saying nothing more. He returned to Maria, knelt in front of her. Her face was red, eyes brimming, breath short. "I don't want to go back, Michael. I know I messed up. I got lost. But they locked me away, erased me. I can't go back there." He took a deep breath, throat tight, ran his hand gently across her face, trying to calm her. "We're going to figure this out. Slowly. With the truth. But you're not alone anymore." She cried silently. It wasn't sadness. It was pure despair. Terror. That night, Michael didn't sleep. He sat on the floor beside the sofa, watching Maria sleep in pieces. And inside him, something was beginning to grow. Rage. Because now, more than ever, he knew. Someone was hiding the truth, and someone would have to answer for it. Very soon. Michael woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. The sun hadn't even risen, the room still wrapped in darkness. His body ached. He'd spent the night on the floor. He stood slowly, stretching his back, heart pounding. He wasn't sure what he feared more, what was coming, or what he still didn't know. Maria was still asleep. Her face looked calmer now, but still carried the exhaustion of someone who had lived too much. Michael watched her for a few seconds. She was just a fragment of who she used to be. Even so, broken as she was, she stirred something in him he couldn't explain. It made him angry. It made him want to protect her. It made him want to run. Out in the hallway, another sound. He walked to the door, barefoot, slowly. Looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just an envelope on the floor. He picked it up carefully, his name written by hand, in a stiff, cold handwriting. He opened it right there. A single sheet, with a direct message. "Mr. Michael Parker, we are closely monitoring the situation regarding Ms. Maria Lewis. We strongly advise you to proceed with her voluntary return. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action." No signature. Just a dry stamp in the bottom corner. Norwood Foundation. Michael's blood ran cold. Rage shot up like an explosion. He threw the paper onto the table and walked back to the couch. Maria was awake, staring at the ceiling. She didn't say a word. Just lay there, motionless. Michael knelt beside her again. "There are people who want to take you. By force," he said bluntly, no filter. She didn't move. "They sent a warning, called you a patient, said they'll take legal action." Maria took a deep breath, but every breath looked like a struggle, as if each word weighed more than her own body. "They erased me," she said softly. "Kept me drugged. Made me forget who I was. When I tried to leave, they called me crazy. Made everyone believe it." Michael's stomach turned. He ran a hand across his forehead, trying to stay grounded. Why didn't anyone know about this, Maria? Why didn't Emily say anything? She shut her eyes tight. Because she was scared. Scared of him. Michael went silent. That word echoed in his head like a punch. Him. Who was he? Before he could ask, Maria gripped his arm tightly. Her eyes changed, now filled with something he couldn't quite name. Rage, memory, pure panic. "If they take me, I won't come back. And if I disappear again, no one will ever know what really happened to Emily." Michael froze. Hearing Emily's name said like that, with all that weight, hurt. But it hurt even more to think that everything he lived with her might have had a dark side, buried in silence now showing up at the door with threats. Outside, daylight was beginning to break. But inside that apartment, everything felt on the edge of collapse. Michael remained kneeling in front of her, his whole body tingling. His head pounded, like every heartbeat brought a new question without an answer. He ran his hands over his face, took a deep breath, and looked at Maria, who was now crying quietly, biting her lips to stay silent. The apartment, always quiet, had become a minefield. Every sound from the hallway made Michael wonder if the men in suits were coming back. If that damn letter was only the beginning. He wanted to act, but felt lost. Everything seemed out of control. He stood up suddenly, walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, grabbed a glass of water but couldn't drink. His hands were shaking so badly, the glass nearly slipped. He looked out the window, trying to collect his thoughts, but the city view only made things worse. Out there, the world kept turning. In here, everything was falling apart. When he returned to the living room, Maria was still in the same spot. Curled up, eyes swollen, face red. Michael sat beside her, his back heavy, like he was carrying years of guilt on his shoulders. "I'm going to fix this," he said, more to himself than to her. "I don't know how, but I will." Maria turned her head slowly, her eyes full of fear and doubt. "You don't get it, Michael. These people, they have power, money. They own judges, cops. No one listens when it's against them." He took a deep breath, the anger rising like fire in his chest. "Then they haven't met me yet." His voice was firm, almost like a promise. "And if I have to, I'll fight them too." She gave a nervous, bitter laugh, the laugh of someone who's lost too much to still believe in happy endings. Jake appeared in the bedroom doorway, sleepy-eyed, scratching his messy hair. "Dad, what's going on?" Michael froze for a moment. He didn't want to involve his son, but he couldn't lie either. "Nothing for you to worry about, champ." He forced a smile. "Go grab some breakfast. I'll take you to school soon." Jake nodded slowly, but before leaving, he glanced at Maria with that protective look he'd had since day one. Michael saw it, and his chest tightened even more. When the boy disappeared down the hallway, Michael turned to her. "Can you stay alone for a few hours? I need to take care of some things." Maria took a deep breath, wiped her face with a trembling hand, and nodded. "I'll try." He grabbed his phone, fingers shaking as he typed. He knew exactly who to call. Someone who owed him old favors, someone who knew how to deal with the dirt of powerful people. As the phone rang, Michael looked at Maria one last time before stepping out. And in that look, he saw what he feared the most. She was breaking again. And this time, there might be no way to put the pieces back together. Michael stepped out of the building with his phone in hand and his heart pounding. The morning traffic already filled the streets, but he barely saw anything ahead. He called Raphael, an old friend, someone with enough connections to open doors that didn't exist for ordinary people. "Rafa, I need your help. Bad." On the other end, the response was instant. "What's with that tone, man? What happened?" Michael laid it all out as directly as he could. Told him about the foundation, the letter, the suited men, and the fear in Maria's eyes. "Give me their address," Raphael said, his voice solid. "I'll dig up everything I can." Michael hung up and exhaled, as if that call gave him back some sense of control. But he knew better. He knew this went deeper than he ever imagined. Hours later, back home, Michael found Maria sitting on the balcony. She was wearing one of his old t-shirts, far too big for her frail body, but there was something new in her eyes, a flicker of strength, like, with every minute away from that place that haunted her, she was regaining a piece of herself. Michael sat beside her, trying to hide his nerves. "They didn't come back, at least not yet," he said, breaking the silence. Maria took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I keep thinking about everything I lost, everything that could have been different, but, as crazy as it sounds, I still want to start over." She gave a slight smile, crooked but alive. "After everything, I still want to live." Michael felt the knot in his throat tighten. That woman, even shattered, still carried a hope he had forgotten existed, and from that day on, things started to change. Slowly, but they changed. Michael decided Maria couldn't go on living as just a guest. He wanted to give her more than a roof. He wanted to give her dignity. Little by little, he offered her small tasks at the company. Nothing overwhelming. Simple things, organizing files, managing documents. At first, she refused, said she wasn't ready, that she didn't deserve it. But he insisted. "Maria, this isn't charity. This is about what's fair," he said in a tone that left no room for discussion. Jake was the first to celebrate when she accepted. He ran through the apartment telling his dad that now Maria had a real job, and the smile she gave that day. Michael never forgot it. Time went on, and their friendship grew. Michael still found himself battling his own feelings. Her way, her shy laughs, the way she cared for Jake. All of it brought Emily's image flooding back. But at the same time, Maria was different. She had a sensitivity all her own, a kind of sweetness wrapped in a sadness so deep it felt like it was constantly asking for shelter, for protection. And Jake, he didn't even try to hide it. He fell asleep in her lap in the living room, asked for bedtime stories, showed her school drawings like she was a second mom. Michael watched it all, and his chest tightened in a confusing way. A mix of happiness and guilt. Happiness to see his son smiling again. Guilt for feeling like, in some way, he was letting go of Emily. But it was already inevitable. Maria had become part of their routine, and no matter how many painful answers life still had in store, he knew there was no going back to the way things were. That morning, Michael arrived early at the office. He had barely parked when his phone began to buzz with emails and messages. But for the first time in a long while, he ignored everything. His mind was only on her, on Maria, and the storm she brought with her. Before even sitting down, he opened the desk drawer and pulled out an employment form. He filled out the basics with what little he knew. Name, Maria Lewis. Address, temporary, Parker residence. Phone, his own. He ran his fingers through his hair, took a deep breath, and called Anna, the HR manager. "Anna, I need you to find a light job. Part-time, something like filing, document organization, easy stuff." "Who's the candidate?" Anna asked, surprised. "A friend. Special situation. Just trust me." Anna replied only with a curt, "Okay, sir," in that tone that clearly said questions will come later. Returning home that evening, Michael entered the apartment slowly. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Maria was in the kitchen, wearing an old apron tied clumsily around her waist, trying to make bread with whatever she found in the pantry. The scene pulled a smile from him, even if he didn't want it. She noticed him and turned around, cheeks flushed. "I thought I could try to be useful around here," she said, fidgeting nervously with her hands. Michael walked over, grabbed a glass of water just to hide the knot in his throat. "You're doing more than you know." Jake ran through the living room with a paper airplane shouting, "Maria, look, check out my plane." And she, even tired, dropped everything and got down on the floor to play with him as if the outside world didn't exist. Michael just stood there, watching. It stirred something in him he couldn't explain. It was beautiful, but it hurt. He saw parts of Emily in her, but also things Emily never had. An insane generosity, even with nothing. A habit of taking care of others, even while broken herself. And that made him want to protect her even more. That night, after Jake had gone to sleep, they sat on the balcony. The wind was cold, but Maria refused to go back inside. "You know what's the worst part?" she said, eyes lost in the city lights. "It wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was being invisible, feeling like no one remembered I existed." Michael sat beside her, resting his elbows on his knees. "I remember you," he said softly, almost a whisper. She turned her head slowly, eyes full of tears. For a second, Michael thought of holding her hand, but he held back. They sat there in silence, just listening to the distant sound of cars, while a new chapter, completely uncertain, began to take shape between them. That night, Michael struggled to sleep, tossed and turned in bed, his chest tight, his mind full. Maria slept in the guest room, but her presence felt like it filled every corner of the house. The smell of her morning coffee still lingered. The sound of her laughter with Jake still echoed in his head. And that, as beautiful as it was, hurt. It hurt because Emily's image wouldn't leave him. Every smile from Maria, every timid mannerism, it all blended. It felt like the ghosts of the past and his real life were constantly at war inside him. The next day, Michael arrived at the office and couldn't focus on anything. At lunchtime, the phone rang. It was his mother, as direct as ever. "Michael, I heard about your guest." Her voice came heavy with contempt. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a second. "It's none of your business, Mom." "Of course it is. You have a young son. Have you thought about what people will say? The media loves a scandal, Michael. A millionaire and a homeless woman. Is that the kind of headline you want?" He gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Mom, I don't care what people say." "Well, you should. You have a name to protect, a reputation." Her voice rose. "And this woman, you barely know her. She could be playing you." Before he exploded, Michael hung up mid-sentence. He sat there, seething, his whole body burning with anger, heart pounding, throat clenched. When he got home, he found Maria folding clean clothes in the living room. She smiled when she saw him walk in, but the smile died when she saw the tension on his face. "Everything okay?" she asked, in that quiet voice of someone who already expects the worst. Michael just shook his head, dropped his briefcase on the floor, and headed straight for the kitchen. Opened the fridge without reason, just needing something to do with his hands. Maria stood in the doorway, fiddling with her fingers, nervous. I can leave if you want. I don't want to cause trouble." He turned instantly, eyes red from bottled-up fury. "Stop saying that! You're not causing anything!" His voice came out louder than he meant. She stepped back, startled. Michael took a deep breath, closed his eyes, walked up to her and, in a gesture that surprised even himself, gently held her hands. "I'm sorry. He swallowed hard. "There are people saying things, people who think you shouldn't be here, that you're not good enough." Her eyes filled with tears immediately. She slowly pulled her hands away, as if afraid even of his touch. "I get it," she said, voice cracking. "I know what people think when they look at me. I know what I look like. An embarrassment." "No," Michael shot back. "You're not that. Never were." The silence between them thickened, almost suffocating. Maria looked down, shoulders trembling. "But I'm not Emily, Michael," she whispered, "and I never will be." Those words cut through Michael like a blade. The weight of guilt crashed onto his shoulders. He wanted to tell her she wasn't a replacement, that she was her, just her. But the words wouldn't come. Before he could find the courage to speak, Maria turned and rushed up the stairs, her footsteps loud and fast, like someone desperate to disappear. Michael stood frozen in the middle of the living room, staring at the staircase like it was a cliff. The sound of her footsteps echoed on the wooden steps, each one landing like an accusation. He ran his hand over his face, took a deep breath, and thought about going after her, but his legs wouldn't move. He stayed there for a few minutes, fighting the lump in his throat, grabbed his phone, unlocked the screen, then locked it again. He wanted to call someone, to let it all out, but who? Who would understand? Who could listen to all this without judgment? He climbed the stairs slowly, stopped in front of her room, knocked softly. "Maria, can I come in?" No response. He leaned his forehead against the door, closed his eyes. Her silence hurt more than any scream. He wanted to open the door, hold her, say everything all at once. But he knew it wasn't the moment. He went back downstairs, into the kitchen, started fidgeting with things without thinking. Grabbed a mug, poured some coffee, but his hands were shaking so much he nearly spilled it. Looked at the living room. Jake's toys were scattered all over the floor, and that just tightened his chest even more. His phone buzzed. A message from an old friend, one of those who never miss a chance to poke. "Dude, what's going on?" Word spreading at the club. They're saying you've got a homeless woman living with you. You've lost it?" Michael muttered a curse under his breath and threw the phone across the room. The sound made Maria open the door upstairs. Her eyes were a mix of fear and exhaustion. "I'm leaving tomorrow morning," she said softly, her voice cracking. "I don't want to cause you more trouble." He ran up the stairs 2 at a time, stopped right in front of her, breathless. "No, stop!" His voice came out raw, full of emotion. "You're not leaving just because a bunch of judgmental people think they can decide our lives." Maria tried to step away, but he grabbed her arm tightly, like he was afraid she might vanish. "I mean it," she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. "I can't keep being a problem in your life. I won't be anyone's replacement, not even close." Those words hit him like a punch. Michael let go of her arm immediately, as if he'd been shocked. "You're not," he said quietly, voice trembling. "You're you, Maria." They stood there, facing each other, breathless, their faces so close he could smell her, a mix of cheap soap and fresh coffee. Michael wanted to say more, to open his heart, but fear locked the words inside him. She lowered her eyes, took a deep breath, and gently closed the door in his face. No yelling, no drama, just a silence sharp as glass. Michael went back down, sat on the couch, threw his head back and closed his eyes. His heart pounded, his breathing out of sync. He knew he was starting to get lost in her, and worse, he wasn't sure he wanted to find his way back. He sat there on the couch, hands covering his face, his chest heavy. The sound of the door closing upstairs echoed like a warning. He knew. It couldn't go on like this. That guilt, that past, that fear, it all had to end. He rushed upstairs without thinking, stopped in front of her door, took a deep breath and opened it without asking. Maria was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands trembling, eyes full of unshed tears. She looked at him like she was bracing for another blow, another fall. But Michael went straight to the point. No filter, no fear. "I can't do this anymore, Maria." His voice was low but sharp. "I can't keep living between what was and what I wished had been." She swallowed hard, confused. "I'm not an easy man," he continued, throat tightening. "But I'm also not the same man who buried Emily and decided to die with her. You came into this house, into this life, and turned everything upside down. But you also brought back something I didn't even remember existed. The will to breathe again." Maria lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. "I don't want to be a burden to you," she whispered. "You're not." Michael stepped forward, knelt in front of her, cupped her face in both hands. "God, you're not." For a moment, she pulled back, but didn't flee. She stayed there, her face in his hands, her eyes pouring out years of pain. When he leaned his forehead against hers, the world seemed to stop. Her scent, her warmth, it was all too real to ignore. "Let me take care of you. For real. No guilt, no comparisons. Just you and me." His voice cracked, but every word rang true. Maria closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time, she didn't say no. That night, she fell asleep in his arms, on the floor, on the carpet, the two of them holding each other like they were afraid to let go and lose what they'd just found. In the days that followed, she started coming out of the room more, started helping with little things around the house, then at the company. At first, small steps, shy steps, but each one felt like a scream of freedom. One day, while organizing one of Emily's old drawers, Maria found a notebook. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed, and a title, written in Emily's handwriting, "Women Who Start Over." Maria flipped through it carefully. Each page held the start of a story, stories of women who had fallen, been abused, faced loneliness, all trying to find the strength to go on. She was going to write a book, Maria said softly, showing the notebook to Michael, her eyes shining. About pain, about starting over. Michael ran a hand across the cover, swallowing hard. Maria took a deep breath, a smile on her face that blended longing and courage. "I think," she said, her voice firm for the first time in a long while. It's my turn to finish what she started. Michael stood there holding the notebook, feeling the weight of it all. Emily's pages, Maria's voice. It was like time had punched him straight in the chest. He looked at her, eyes full of tears, but with a new light, a light he hadn't seen in a long time. Maria was more alive than ever. She wasn't just a woman trying to survive. She was someone with a purpose. If you want, he said, voice hoarse, I'll help you with this. Publish it, organize it, whatever it takes. Maria gave a small but honest smile. The first genuine smile in days. I'm gonna need help. I don't even know where to start. Michael took a deep breath, ran a hand through his hair, trying to organize the storm of emotions inside him. But before he could say anything, his phone buzzed on the table. It was Raphael. He answered immediately. Man, it's worse than I thought, Raphael said, tension thick in his voice. That Norwood Foundation, it's a front. They've got a history of abuse with patients. Some old reports, buried by powerful people. Michael froze. Who's behind it? A name you know too well. Raphael paused long. Richard Martin, the investor who's been trying to buy your commercial property downtown. And, Michael, he had a history with Emily. I don't know how deep this goes, but there's a lot of dirt in this mess. The name made the ground vanish beneath Michael's feet. Richard, the same guy who was always at business dinners, the fake friend, easy smiles, false hugs. He hung up, speechless. His hands were shaking. He looked at Maria. She noticed immediately. Something was wrong. Who was it? She asked, her body tense. Someone who shouldn't be part of this, but is. Michael walked over, sat next to her on the couch, still holding the notebook in his hands. Maria, there's a name behind all this, and it's someone Emily knew, someone I knew. Her face went pale. She brought her hands to her mouth like trying to hold the panic inside. I remember him, she whispered, voice trembling. He promised to help me, said he'd get me out of that clinic, and then I disappeared. The pieces started falling into place, in a way Michael wished they wouldn't. The weight of that revelation hit his chest like an anchor. What was once emotional confusion turned into a bitter certainty. Powerful people were behind this. Maria, still shaking, clutched the notebook to her chest like armor. She looked at Michael, tears welling in her eyes. If he did this to me, if what I'm starting to remember is true, then I need to write. I need to tell the story. Even if it's just to warn other women. Even if it's just so no one else ends up in his hands. Michael nodded, his gaze steady, his voice sharp. And I'll be right here. Till the end. He hung up the call with his hands shaking, heart pounding like he'd just finished a marathon. Richard's name echoed in his mind like poison swallowed by mistake. He rubbed his face, trying to understand how all of it was connected. Emily, Maria, the foundation, the entire past. He looked at Maria, still curled up on the corner of the couch, hugging the notebook. Her eyes searched his for a kind of safety he wasn't sure he could offer. But still, he moved closer, sat beside her, gently placed his arm around her shoulders, afraid she might pull away. But this time, she didn't. She rested her head on his chest, eyes still tearful, but less afraid. The following days were filled with a strange silence. Maria wrote more and more. She'd take the notebook, sit on the balcony for hours, scribbling fragments of memory. Michael watched from afar, not knowing how much pain each page cost her. But her eyes, they no longer looked broken. There was anger, there was fire, there was life. One night, after putting Jake to bed, Michael approached her with 2 glasses of wine. Maria accepted, giving him a small smile that warmed his chest. They sat on the living room floor, leaning against the couch, talked about everything, laughed about silly things, cried over things they couldn't even explain. When their eyes met, something shifted. Michael leaned in slowly, afraid to scare her. But she didn't pull away. And in that kiss, they released months of pain, fear, and buried longing. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Maria became part of his life, first in routine, then in feelings, then in future plans. At the company, the staff got used to the woman who showed up early, hair tied up loosely, but with the smile of someone learning how to live again. People whispered, but Michael no longer cared. Jake was the happiest of all. If he used to ask where Maria was, now he drew pictures with her in the middle. At school, when the teacher asked who the most important person in his life was, he didn't hesitate. My mom and Maria. Michael's eyes stung when he heard that. So did Maria's. Over time, the foundation's threats faded. Not because they gave up, but because Michael did what he knew best. Used power, money, and connections to bury the issue. At least, for now. But no one expected what came next. One evening, while Maria was sorting through Emily's old clothes to donate, Michael walked into the room with a nervous smile. He stopped at the door, took a deep breath, and said, "Marry me." Maria froze, dropped the blouse in her hands, stared at him like she didn't understand. Is this a joke? I've never been more serious in my life." She brought her hands to her face, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Before he could say it again, she ran to him and hugged him so tight he nearly lost his balance. The wedding was simple. No church, no luxury. Just them, Jake, a few real friends, and a justice of the peace. On the day they said "I do," Maria wore a borrowed dress, holding a small bouquet of simple flowers. But her smile, that smile lit up everything. The end of their story became a symbol of renewal and forgiveness. Michael and Maria, now husband and wife, built a new life together, with Jake as their bond. Maria was no longer the woman who had once survived the streets. She became someone truly successful, not in bank accounts, but in self-worth, courage, and love. They had a son together, and their story, of a love reborn, became a legacy, passed down through generations, a symbol of second chances, no matter the circumstances. But even with rings on their fingers and future plans in hand, a shadow still haunted Michael's thoughts. Richard, he knew. That man hadn't given up, and worse, he felt like his next move could come at any moment. That morning the sky was gray, heavy, like even the weather could feel what was coming. Michael tried to focus on company reports, but his eyes kept drifting to his phone, waiting for Raphael's call. Richard's name echoed like a warning siren in his mind. Across town, Maria sat on the balcony, Emily's notebook in her lap. Her fingers trembled with every word she wrote. Between lines, she'd pause, look at the horizon, searching for courage in the storm clouds. Jake, oblivious, played with a puzzle in the living room. Now and then he'd call his mom to show his progress. She tried to smile, but it was a tired smile, one only visible to those who knew the weight she carried. Mid-afternoon, Michael's phone rang. He picked up on the first ring. "Man, I got the address," Raphael said. "Richard's private office, top floor, commercial building near Fifth Avenue. And there's more. His name's on multiple contracts with the foundation, money laundering, charity fraud, all hidden under shell companies." Michael closed his eyes, breathed deep, blood pulsing at his temples. "I need to talk to him, in person." "Are you sure?" Raphael warned. "This guy doesn't play fair." "Exactly why I need to." He hung up, grabbed his keys and the blazer thrown over the chair, stopped for a moment, looked toward the balcony. Maria was still there, clutching the notebook. He walked to her, crouched beside her, placed a hand gently over hers. "I need to take care of something. Promise me you won't leave the house until I get back?" She looked up, silent shock on her face. Did something happen? Not yet, but it might. He squeezed her hand. "Do you trust me?" Maria nodded, but her eyes already betrayed the fear rising second by second. Michael kissed her forehead gently, took a breath, and left. In the car, traffic crawled. Every horn, every brake made his nerves tighten. When he reached the building, He rode the elevator up, his heart pounding. The hallway was long, silent, thick carpet muffling each step. He stopped in front of a dark wooden door with a golden plaque, RM Consulting. His hand trembled as he pressed the doorbell. Seconds later, the door opened, and there he was, Richard Martin, a smug smile, cold eyes. Michael Parker, what a surprise. His voice was low, dripping with irony. Michael inhaled sharply, the blood in his veins boiling. We need to talk, and it won't be quick. He stepped into the office, heart racing. Richard stood there, arms crossed, with that arrogant smirk Michael had always hated. But this time, Michael wasn't here to talk. He was here to end it. Enough games, Richard. His voice was steady, firmer than ever. I know everything. The foundation, the money laundering, what you did to Maria, and to Emily. The smirk disappeared. Richard stiffened, arms still crossed. Watch your accusations, Michael. You've got no proof. Don't I? Michael pulled out his phone and showed the screen. Audio recordings, testimonies, documents, everything Raphael had found. This is enough to end your career, your freedom, and whatever shred of dignity you've got left. Richard went pale, tried to step forward, but Michael cut him off. If you come near Maria again, if even one of your people sets foot near my house, you'll be behind bars before sunrise. Silence. Heavy. Richard breathing hard, face red with fury, but he knew. He'd lost. Michael turned his back and walked out without waiting for a response. The hallway felt brighter now, the air lighter. In the car, he took a long breath and called home. I'm coming back. When he walked into the apartment, Maria was on the balcony, Jake in her lap, telling a story to keep their minds busy. When she saw Michael, her eyes filled with tears again, but this time, they were from relief. Is it over? She asked softly. Michael walked to her, cupped her face in both hands, and answered in the simplest, most honest way. It's over. Jake ran to hug him. The three of them stayed there, wrapped in each other's arms, as if the world had finally given them a break. The days that followed were peaceful. Maria went back to writing, stronger now, more certain. Her book came out months later, with a title that felt like fate, Women Who Start Over. It sold like crazy. Made headlines, inspired countless people who thought their lives were over. Michael and Maria rebuilt everything from the ground up, a new home, far from the pain. Jake got a baby brother 2 years later, and every night before bed, Michael thanked the stars for having had the courage to fight, to not give up. And now, it's up to you. If you made it this far, it's because this story hit you somewhere deep. So you need to subscribe to the channel. Not tomorrow, not later. Now. Smash that like button. It tells the algorithm you want more raw, emotional stories like this. Flood the comments. What scene hit you the hardest? What theory did you have about Maria? What would you do in Michael's place? And the most important part, share this story with at least 5 people who need to hear it. Don't let this story die here. Let it spread. This is your moment to show you're part of this community. So don't wait another second. Let's take this story to the world. See you next time.